Okay, so our next presenter today, as Gus referenced, is around the database redevelopment project that Emily have been running. It's my pleasure to introduce Peta Bradley. Peta is now the Livestock Genetics Project Manager, so we'll give her a congratulations on the bump up the batting order. Who originally started with sheep genetics in the role of Marina Select Development Officer. Via UNE and a Bachelor of Rural Science, her current role is responsible for driving the progress of investments in genetic R&D, and this has been mainly through the vehicle of the National Livestock Genetics Consortium. Within the sheep genetics space, Peta's been involved in most of the technology development projects that Gus referenced earlier, including the sheep genetics search site upgrade, and as we're about to hear about, the database redevelopment. Peta grew up near the village of Armatree in central west New South Wales, and we're very lucky to have her here today. Please put your hands together for Peta Bradley.
Thanks very much, Luke, and it's a pleasure to be here in front of you all today. The Sheep Genetics Database Redevelopment Project is something that we at Sheep Genetics and MLA have spoken about for a little while now, and really about it being a key enabler to the future of our genetic evaluation systems. So it's really exciting that I have the opportunity here today to give an update on how this project is progressing. But before we delve into the project itself, we'll start off by actually revisiting the why. So why did we decide to undertake a database redevelopment project? What it is that we are doing as part of the database redevelopment, and you as breeders and service providers in the room and online today, what can you expect from the redevelopment project? So when we look at why redevelop the sheep genetics databases, I pulled out three key things I think we should look at. The first being the evolution of technology over time, and concurrent evolution of the genetic evaluation systems and how these have evolved in the last 20 years or more. And then finally, the scale of the data sets that we're now dealing with in the genetics space. So if I start with the evolution of technology, we're going to do a bit of a throwback to 2005. If we remember, John Howard was Prime Minister. Crazy Frog ringtone was top of the ARIA charts for 3 weeks in a row. And the Motorola Razr V3 was the top-selling mobile phone of the time. Now, this phone was pretty impressive. I remember at school, if you had one, you were pretty cool. It had 5.5 megabytes of internal storage, which meant in the phone book capacity that you could have 1,000 contacts. And it also rocked a 1.3 megapixel camera. Jump ahead to 2010. 2010, we actually had two Prime Ministers that year, Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd. And the Samsung Galaxy S was the top-selling mobile phone. Now, we've jumped a fair way in those 5 years. This one had 16 gigabytes of internal storage, a 4 megapixel camera, and the main selling point was it had GPS, Bluetooth, and an FM radio. At the end of last year, Apple released its new iPhone 12, and I'll take the Pro model as the example here. This phone has 512 gigabytes of storage, a 12 megapixel camera with 4K video. So what this means is that between 2005 and 2020, so 15 years, we had a 9 million% increase in the storage capacity of the most popular mobile phone of the time, which is massive. I thought I'd done my maths wrong when I first worked that one out. Now, at the same time, our genetic evaluation systems have also evolved. So at the last leading breeder at Dubbo, we were celebrating 30 years of genetic evaluation from the launch of Land Plan in 1989 with 2 traits, weight and fat. If we look at it now from a database point of view and the types of data and database systems that we've been using over this time, in 1992, I was talking to Stephen Field the other week, who manages our current Land Plan database, and he first began to write code for his current system, which is called GEM, Genetic Evaluation Management, back in 1992. So that's when the first code was starting to be written for the Land Plan system. In 1994, the first cross-flock analysis run was complete, and this was run on computers at the New South Wales DPI, and we'll have a look at that a little bit later. Now, from 2000, the first terminal across breed where we're looking and being able to compare multiple breeds in the same analysis, and the use of the OVIS evaluation software began. Jumping ahead now to 2005, so we've been running the land plan database systems since Stephen first started to develop them. Now in 2005, we've got Sheep Genetics was formed, we've brought in the Merino evaluations into Merino Select, and databases, a new database for Merino Select data was beginning to be developed, or developed by 2005. 2007, we saw the introduction of the information nucleus flock. So what does this mean for the data and data capture is that for the first time really we've got large-scale research and genomic data beginning to be collected. And then over the last 10 or so years, 2013, we saw that genomic data begin to be used in the evaluation for the first time as RBVs for eating quality traits. 2017, we had the world first single-step evaluation launched in sheep. And then last year, we had exceptional growth, as Gus touched on, in the amount of genotypes coming into our evaluation system. So all through this time, there's been continual developments to our genetic evaluation and the genomic technologies that we're using in the evaluation. So it's really important to note, I think, that whilst we've been developing technology, like we saw from the evolution of the mobile phone, we've also been developing our genetic evaluation systems and the type of information we can use in that. And then there's the scale of the data sets we're using. So I think I was a bit naive when I first started at Sheep Genetics. I thought a Excel file with 50,000 rows and 10 columns was a pretty big data set. But that's nothing compared to the data we deal with in genetics. So going back to that 1994 across flock run, now that was just a Pol Dorset run, and that was calculating breeding values for 12,000 animals for approximately 13 traits. And that was being run about once a month, and it was a big deal to go down to Orange, New South Wales DPI, where those computer systems were stored that were capable of doing a genetic evaluation of that scale. And then now, as of last month, this is the size of the evaluations that we're dealing with, and these are being run every 2 weeks. So you can see in Merino and in terminals, we're dealing with more than 3 million animals. We've got a lot of records in there for a lot of traits. And really the growth in the last few years has been around the number of genotypes being used in the evaluation. And since this table was created, we've exceeded 120,000 genotypes being used in the Merino Select evaluation. So not only has there been big changes in technology and the genetic evaluation systems we're using, but we're also now dealing with very, very large data sets. Now, to demonstrate just how large, I thought I'd use our genomic database as an example. So when you go to the paddock and you take a genotype of an animal, so some of you or many of you have probably used the TSUs, you send that TSU away to a lab and it gets processed. The standard test now uses approximately 50,000 single nucleotide polymorphisms per genotype taken. So one genotype, 50,000 SNPs. For each SNP, the type of information that we capture is the marker name, so whereabouts that SNP is located on the DNA, the sample ID, so we can relate it back to the animal that it came from, the value, so what's actually at that site, and the quality of the genotype, so how well did that call during the genotyping process. Now for each individual SNP, those 4 pieces of information would fit on about 1 line of printed paper. And I must thank Clint Gore and Philip Gurman from AgBoo for helping me with the calculations around what would it be, or what would it look like if we were to print the entire genomic database. So what that would look like, bearing in mind we have about 200,000 genotypes across all analyses, 50,000 SNPs per genotype, and 1 line per SNP to print, that would be 10 billion lines, which we would print on 50 million double-sided pieces of paper. We're going double-sided because we're environmentally friendly here, and 10 lines per page. The paper you'd need, that would be $20,000 of that reflex paper, 20,000 boxes of that reflex paper, equating to just under $500,000 worth at our current Officeworks price. If you were to go and print that on your standard Epson home printer, that would take 23.8 years to print, going 24/7, not accounting for changing of cartridges, which no doubt you would have to do. And if you wanted to freight that paper somewhere, you would need 5 road trains to carry that 250 tonnes. So just as a bit of a demonstration, you can see the types of data sets that we're dealing with now in the genetic space. So it's large, and that's only going to keep growing with the rate of genotyping and recording that's happening in our systems. So in summary of why we decided to redevelop the sheep genetics database, you can see there's been big steps forward in the technology we're using over the last 15 years. The genetic evaluation for sheep has very much evolved at a rapid pace over time. And those data sets are getting big and are growing ever more. So we need to be able to be flexible with our data submissions going forward, keep up with the increasing volumes of data that we're seeing, and we need to make our genetic evaluation systems faster. So that's led us to the stage we're at now around the database redevelopment. So what is it? We'll be looking at the 3 phases of the development process, the integration with our industry databases and how we can make genetics talk to other aspects of data capture within the red meat industry, and also what will it look like beyond the development process. So the database redevelopment's been completed in 3 phases. The first phase is actually already complete. And what this was about was getting 3 different databases. So we saw from the evolution that the land plan database was developed first, then the Merino Select database, and then we've got our resource flock database. It's worth noting that these 3 databases are currently all managed by different people and written in 3 different ways, so aren't using unified language. What we did was we've created now a single data warehouse where all our data will be stored going forward. So phase 1 was really about consolidating those 3 databases into that single data warehouse. So what that means by actually having our data stored in a single location is that it really reduces business risk in that we're not relying on the 3 people that specifically manage and know exactly what's in each database. It also increases our serviceability. So the language and the software that we're using for the new data warehouse is written in a much more common language that's well known by a lot of data specialists. And it means we can more easily update and make updates to how we get data in and out of that data warehouse, which we'll talk about in a moment. So the phase that we're currently working on at the moment is phase 2. And this is really around getting data into that data warehouse, getting data out, and analysed. So, as I said before, we've created this data warehouse where we've merged those 3 databases together. The first part is about getting your breeder on-farm data into that data warehouse. So how do we, at the moment, you create a file, you email that file, and you send it away to Stephen or Ermias, depending if you're a land plan or Merino Select client. So what we're working towards with phase 2 is where you more directly interact with that data warehouse to get your data up. And what that means for you as the breeder is that you'll have more autonomy of the data import process, and we'll look at that later on in the presentation. And it also will allow in the future more flexible data capture for new and novel traits, which I think that was a great question you asked Deb before about these other traits and how we're going to capture them going forward. So I think the new data platform system really lends itself to that. And then there's getting data out of that data warehouse and sent for analysis, so to OVIS, to AGBU, the evaluation software that we're using. So that involves building files that are compatible with the OVIS system so that it can run our world-class or Rolls-Royce genetic evaluation. That process is going to be an update of what it currently is, and what that'll allow is it'll allow better use of available data, and it will lead and help as we continue to develop OVIS, because we're no longer limited by the structure of the data or the different database it was coming from. It'll allow the development of the next generation of analytical software. So really that's what phase 2 of the database redevelopment is about, but once we want to roll this out as soon as we can, but we still need to have and support our existing systems, so around reporting, so you actually getting results back. So after we've analysed the data, we're still going to be, at the moment, supporting our PDF reports that you get back with data as breeders and service providers, and also uploading that to our website. And then for phase 3, which is planned and in the pipeline, it's about consolidating the genomics database, so that really large database we looked at before, and getting that into that central data warehouse as well. And also then updating the reporting side of it. So I mentioned it's not part of phase 2, but that actually lays into phase 3. So updated reporting that will allow you as breeders to get data back more freely and at your leisure, and when you require it. So phase 3 really here is improving the genomic pipelines and allowing breeders to easily retrieve your information and results post-analysis. One of the other components that we've considered throughout the entire database redevelopment is how we'll be able to integrate our databases. Now we're using a more uniform, standardised language or database language, how we'll be able to use that with other industry data that's being captured out there. So we've got this U-Butte data warehouse system now, but we also know there's a lot of other data out there in industry that's being captured, and even within Meat and Livestock Australia and our Integrity Systems company, there's data from NLIS, NVD, LPA, there's also MSA data being captured. So wouldn't it be great that if we can link these systems and make them talk more freely going forward? So as part of that, we've considered what we call a data lake. And our data, because we're using the same systems that the new NLIS systems and have been built off, that we're using a common platform that allows us to feed information into that central data lake. A data lake just stores data that's unprocessed, but will allow us to leverage off other industry investment and data. So for example, data being captured when we roll out MSA, Mark II in lamb, so potentially IMF data, if we can feed that back through our genetic evaluation pipeline. So we've really been developed with that forward-thinking mind cap on that'll allow us to make best use of the data going forward. And then there's also beyond phase 3. So once we've integrated that phase, that final phase of the database, we're not going to stop there. We want to keep developing. So we're not limited by infrastructure anymore. We've got a database with lots of support or lots of support available. So what might be possible? It'll allow us to potentially develop new genetic products for your commercial producers, easier access to the latest breeding values, integration with other commercial data, and also more flexibility with data capture when you can submit what type of information and when you can submit that. So there was actually a really nice quote I heard the other day that kind of summarises a bit where we're heading beyond phase 3, and it's to start by doing what is necessary, then do what is possible, and then suddenly you're doing the impossible. And I think that really does sum up where we're heading with this project. So in summary, what is the database redevelopment project? And what will happen? Breeders will be definitely beginning to see the benefits of this very shortly as we begin to roll out phase 2, where you'll be able to be directly integrating with that new data warehouse. It'll allow more seamless integration with other industry database systems, and will allow more possibilities to grow and develop new technologies and tools. The final area I wanted to cover today was what to expect as breeders and service providers. You've heard me talk about this now. You're going, well, what does this mean for me? So I'll cover now quickly how the data upload process will work and what that will look like. Improvements to how that data is being used by OVIS, and how phase 2 will be delivered to you very shortly. So the uploading process, as I mentioned, we've got a new data warehouse and we're improving how you get data into that. We're able to leverage off our new sheep genetics website. Because this website's now being built on a modern platform, we can now add new features around uploading data there. So we're expecting to see something like on the right of the screen there, around an upload portal. Once you're logged in, you can go there to upload your data, and then you can upload your data directly on the spot to the website. So what that will allow you, and we'll look at it in the next slide, is on-the-spot feedback and validation around the data that you're submitting at the time. So if you think about the current pipeline for data submission, you get a file out of your software, you send that off. It might be a day or two before you get a notification that that's been imported to the system. In that time, you've walked away from your computer, you're out in the paddock, it mightn't work for you. The benefits of this system is that you're able to, as soon as you're ready, you've worked with your data in the software, you can upload it directly to the website while you're sitting there at the computer. If there's any validation come up, you can quickly fix it and re-upload if required, or push it directly to the run and know that that data's been included in the next available analysis. So what we'll begin to see here is more information reported back to you. So at the moment, between the Land Plan and the Merino Select systems, there's very different amounts of information being reported back. Land Plan you might submit off and you get an email to say that that's been included in the run, and we trust, and Stephen does a very good job at checking that data that goes in, but you as the breeder know your own data better than any of us and what should be in that file. So the benefit of the new system will be that you'll get on-the-spot detailed feedback of the information that's in the file that you're uploading at the time. So that will look at exactly what data will be included and what's gone into analysis, including exclusions, etc. You'll be able to update that data quickly if you require, and you'll also be able to compare, if you've already submitted that 2020 drop and you've gone and done a new weight measurement, you'll be able to actually compare the old file with the new file and go, oh yes, those weight records I recorded yesterday, they've now been included in the file and will be included in the analysis. So you'll begin to see things like on the screen, more detail than what you've seen in the past around the information in the files that you're uploading. Another benefit that you mightn't directly see as a breeder is that we're also improving the way research data can get uploaded to that data warehouse. So you remember we brought in the resource flock database into the central data warehouse. And what this will mean is that it'll be reduced downtime. If anyone's been involved in research kills or our resource flock satellite flocks, there can be a bit of a lag time between when animals are slaughtered, that IMF or shear force measurements are collected, and then that being uploaded to the database. Because this has been more streamlined, more people will be able to do that upload process. It should reduce the downtime between those research kills and when that data is being used in the evaluation. The bit I wanted to really highlight today is what you might be seeing in terms of changes to your breeding values. So if we think back to what phase 2 is about, it's about getting data into the warehouse, which we've just looked at, but it's about getting data out of the warehouse and sent to analysis. So there may be different data being sent to the analysis because we are updating and improving the systems and validation that we use to get data sent to analysis. So what the outcome of this will be is that breeding values will be calculated using the best possible information, because we are reviewing and making sure the validation we use to get data to OVIS is the best possible, uses the best possible information. As a result, there may be some movement in breeding values. We're not sure at the extent of this, we're testing it at the moment. Why? And that's because we are enhancing the way data is being exported to the evaluation. So to try and minimise any impacts here, we are testing and validating changes. And we had a comment before, but like any major change to our evaluation, we're not going to be launching it in the middle of ram sale time or anything like that. It'll be rolled out as part of our annual analysis enhancements that Gus spoke about in the earlier presentation. So the main reasons why the data going to OVIS might be different, and that is around we are updating thresholds, trait thresholds, and the validation routine for different traits. We're also updating our age shuffling, so sometimes when animals are a similar age, they might go into yearling or hogget. So we're updating the shuffling techniques there, and that will allow us to use more data records. And we're also doing updates to grouping, particularly lifetime grouping, so how an animal and what group of other animals that individual is associated with throughout its lifetime. So the implementation will be rolled out as part of those enhancements to minimise any impact on your business, but it will be using better data in the evaluation. As part of that, we'll be doing extensive testing with all our stakeholders about the systems and also the data going to OVIS. So the first stage that we're just in the process of the moment is testing that new data that's getting sent to analysis, so working closely with AGBU there. We'll also begin to do some testing of that new interface, that new upload interface with some users and service providers. We'll be then launching the new system, and the beauty of launching in the way we will this time is that we can steadily launch different parts of that phase 2. So we can roll out the new data warehouse as being the central source of truth, and then over time gradually release the import process after we internally have ironed out any minor issues or bugs. And that's really what these next 3 phases are about. So we'll begin to use that new data submission pipeline you'll be still sending your files to Ermias or Stephen, and then we'll begin to train and upskill our service providers around it. So you've got options to go for support, and also testing with you, our leading breeders, that new import system. So actually getting you to upload your own data through that. And then we'll finally do a widespread rollout of that import system to minimise any impacts on your business. So I think the key message here is that we are very conscious that there will be changes, but we really want to make sure we do the most thorough testing and review before any widespread rollout happens. So in summary, what can we expect from the database redevelopment? You'll definitely have more control, as we saw through the new import and upload process. There'll be improvements to the way you can submit data into the evaluation. And of course, there'll be thorough testing and refinement. And I think I should highlight, as part of those analysis enhancements, we will be communicating directly, as we always do with our breeders, around if your flock particularly moves and why those changes might be happening. In summary of the presentation today, I think our database systems, as we've seen from the evolution of technology and evolution of genetic evaluation systems, they need to adapt to that changing environment and move towards something that's faster and more flexible. The database redevelopment we're covering in 3 phases, and there'll be definitely improvements to the way you can submit, upload and interact with your data going forward. And the database redevelopment is really a key enabler and delivery of enhancements to our Rolls-Royce genetic evaluation. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, so we've got a few questions coming in, so we'll just get straight to those. Just a reminder, if you can text those through using the Slido platform. So, Peter, I guess we're talking, a database question here, cloud-based?
Yep. So the new data warehouse system uses AWS, which is Amazon Web Services systems, which is a cloud-based system. Amazon or AWS is used by a whole range of different companies worldwide and also within Australia. So a lot of our banks use that. Our new NLIS system that I mentioned before, trying to integrate industry databases, is also using the same platform. So that's why we've gone with that, and that tends to be the way other companies in other fields that are dealing with the types of or similar scale of data that we are going with their systems.
Great. Okay, next question, and I like this one. It's a notification system for data submission and reports like there is with online shopping, which, i.e., do you get one when your data is received, data analysed, reported, ready for download, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as part of our initial release of this phase 2 and that new import process, you'll be definitely notified on the spot as you upload your data, when your data is uploaded to the data warehouse and when you're ready to review. And then you'll be able to track that submission. So the submission's been reviewed by you. It might have to go to MLA for review. You can see when MLA or SG have had a chance to have a look at that, and then when that has been included in the run, and when and when the results are coming back. So straight away we mightn't have a full tracking process. We'll definitely be able to track different components, but the beauty of this system and integrating with OVIS going forward is we should get actually more on-the-spot feedback where you can log in and see where we're up to with the analysis, when you can expect to get results back. So that's a longer term approach, but there will definitely be some tracking there in the initial release.
And I'm really interested, and I think this question hits on it nicely around, obviously we saw an example of what a validation system might be. Are we talking there, obviously, the stock standard stuff that we see already with regards to validation of data, so counts of data, sex mixes, groups, etc.?
Yeah, so we're not, reinventing the wheel entirely here. We're definitely doing a major overhaul. So there's some of that stock standard validation that's been done really well in the past. That same logic will come over to the new system, but we're also looking at displaying new information back to you, including lifetime group mapping, so you can actually track how many groups might be in a data submission, because that's something we've identified by having our ramping up reports as an issue quite a common issue. So by putting that in front of breeders and service providers on submission rather than post-analysis, we're hoping we'll be able to make those changes more rapidly and get better quality data into the evaluation.
Excellent. So I think just in terms of outlining for people here, we're talking about a merged database, but the data is still analysed as currently is?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, while we're bringing the land plan, Merino Select databases and Resource FLAC databases into that data warehouse, when we roll out phase 2, it will still be our standard evaluation. So our maternal evaluation, terminal, maternal, Dooney, kid plan. But it also gives us the opportunity, because they are coming from a central source going forward, maybe, from a technical point of view, there's lots of technical hurdles to overcome with combining, say, terminals and maternals, but by having them in the central database, it allows us more flexibility going forward, should we want to be combining those analyses.
Excellent. And then just a final one in terms of when do we expect to see phase 2 implemented?
Yeah. So the technical component from phase 2 we've got a contract with a provider that's delivering this for us. That's going to be finishing in mid-May at this stage. And we'll be, like I said before, we'll be incorporating that as part of our analysis enhancements. So we're just in the process now, with all the other exciting things Gus said will be coming out, on setting a date around our standard May, June time of when those analysis enhancements are rolled out.
Excellent. All right, thanks, Peter. Any final questions? Okay, no more questions. We'll take that one. Might take that one off in the break, if that's okay, Linton, just in the interest of time. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Peter Bradley.